Okay, it is live. Okay, so do we have to go around and say our names?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Chriselle. I'm from Denver.
I'm Carly, and I'm from North Carolina.
I'm
I'm
Victoria. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Victoria.
I'm Victoria. I'm from Indianapolis.
I'm Mitzi, and I'm from Pennsylvania.
I'm Chantel and I'm from Utah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get going. What principles, this is the advocate for against same-sex marriage, what principles of effective speaking did you see in his speech?
I didn't see a lot of effective principles. Maybe I was out to lunch, but I was actually, even though we support the same thing, I was kind of offended by his talk.
Yeah.
He was passionate, and that was important, but I just felt like he was so overloaded with the Bible. It was just, strictly out of the Bible, and felt like everybody he was talking to was a sinner, and that he was really the only people worth living on earth were Christians. I mean,
I
that's
feel like
but
I feel like the only people that could somewhat relate to his stance would be people who believe it because of religious purposes. Like I felt like it wasn't very relatable. You know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and if you notice the people behind him, like they kept looking around, they just weren't into it. You could tell the disconnect was there.
yeah,
he,
it was interesting.
he didn't really have much of a narrative that you could follow.
No, there were no. Go ahead.
He didn't have much of a story. Like it was just more like, here's all this, like church religious info. Like take it, leave it at that. Like there was no like when you compare it to the other one, like where he at least had personal experiences and like was trying to add that effect. Where the first person, it just didn't have anything really.
Yeah, he basically repeated the same thing over and over again.
It's like
Yeah,
how last week we were talking about how when you're talking to an audience that might not be of the same like or similar backgrounds as you are, like beliefs, that you need to have facts. And this week we're learning about the story. And with him, I felt like it was just straight up reading out of the Bible, and not everyone's going to believe in the Bible, so your argument is lost to those people.
Well, and also, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I feel like he lacked conviction because there wasn't a personal story, because he kept looking down at his notes and he kept like not really getting into it. And so because of his lack of personal conviction, like he believed in the Bible, but like you were saying, he was telling everyone was a sinner. And like the other one, I felt like there was more of a personal conviction and he was relaying that to everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he just wasn't very elegant. Like he kind of fit the stereotype that people want to put those who don't are against same-sexual marriage that were like bigots. Kind of, I don't know. He kind of fell into that.
Agreed. Okay, so what was the basis and premise for his stance? I think we covered it. It was like religion, right?
Yeah, I think so.
If you were on the fence when it comes to same-sex marriage, how would you feel after listening to his speech?
Well, I probably wouldn't have jumped on the bandwagon if I'd been on the fence.
Oddly enough, I think I would have gone the other way if I were sitting on the fence, because I just felt like the way he presented himself was kind of the stereotypical Christian, like bigoted person that we all think of, or that people think of when they think of our cause. So probably would have ended up going the other way.
Totally. Okay, so we kind of covered like what was less effective, and kind of just it just wasn't very. Yeah. Anyway, so let's go for same-sex marriage. What principles of effective speaking did you see in his speech?
He did a really good job of establishing the story of self. Like you felt like you knew him and where he was coming from.
He really hit on our emotions. I mean, the things he said are things that I don't think anybody would disagree with. That, you know, everybody wants to belong to a family, and being from a successful family, you know, the argument of, well, you know, a homosexual couple cannot raise a child and have them turn out well. They can't argue that with him because he was very successful. I think the thing that is most missing from his was that it was such a narrow scope that there was not. He didn't know the scope of what the legislation would do, or having it as a law. It was kind of that self-centered stuff that I only care about, you know, what works for me. Now, I think that's the hardest thing with discussions with the homosexual issue, is that they are approaching it from an emotional point of view, that they deserve to be able to love somebody, they deserve to have a family, and it really has nothing to do with the reality of what family is. It's more to do with what are your rights? You know, what can you do? What are your choices? These are my choices, and I want you to embrace my choices.
So, and that's interesting that you brought that up. So, my husband's from Canada, and something that's going on in Canada right now is they're trying to lower the age of consent, meaning that sexual consent can now be at age 12. And yeah, it's serious. They're using the same argument that the gays are. I can love anyone I want. You know, it's all based on feelings. You know, and so you're right. Like the argument, and it's gonna pull through because they've already pulled through gays. You know, where you can love whoever you want. You know, and so like we're slowly getting to the point now where it's like there's no morals. Like this is scary.
Yeah. And again, we're not addressing family, the value of the family unit, regardless of who you are. And I really liked that Matt Walsh. I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say.
I think touched on the fact that it was once you redefine it, you can't redefine it without becoming almost a hypocrite to your own cause. Like once the homosexual people get what they want out of marriage, then they can't turn to another person and say, well, marriage doesn't fit your definition, because you just burst it wide open. Like marriage is now open to anyone. So
yeah. Yeah, I liked how, like, at the beginning of the readings, I can't remember her name now, but she's like, you know, you can totally back up your points with facts. The statistics are there. You know, like, that's what I really liked, you know, because it's true.
Is that Marcia Barlow?
Yeah. So something actually I wanted to bring up that I didn't like about his speech was he said, we don't need people's help. We're Ohioans, and we don't need people's help. And that totally turned me off. I don't know about anybody else, but, like, that was like, oh, you don't need you don't need help, then I shouldn't help you. Or, like, why would I even want to even help your cause right now? You know? Like, that was a huge turnoff.
I agree. As he got near the end of the speech, he started losing me because he was, you know, he lost kind of his strength.
Yeah, I think it went from too personal, like with him being personal, and we were all on board for that, to like the very broad, like we are people from Ohio, and I just or Iowa, wherever, and I just kind of lost it from there. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so what about, sorry?
I say, how many of us would have gone to his side after that speech if we'd been on the fence?
I think I would have been more likely to versus the first one, just because I don't know, you could connect more to him, and it was more of like an emotional response to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But well, if I were comparing the two speeches, then maybe. But if I just heard him, I would have been like, no. Kind of because I think he ended poorly, but also like I'm on. I don't know. It just. I think it was because of his ending. But comparing the two speeches, then yeah, I'd probably, if I were sitting on the fence, would have to go with his.
Well, again, and he was not addressing the value of family so much. He was addressing how children can be raised well and with same-sex parents, and that's really not the issue.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
Right.
definitely some deficiencies that are happening in those relationships, but I think that that's one of the problems is it's hard for us to hone in on what really is the issue. What are we really debating here? Because we're so emotional.
But that's like one of the things that he did well is, what's her name? Marcia Barlow said if you want to get your cause across, like focus on the children and what it'll do for the children and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was a good
So-
point. He certainly did that well.
Yeah.
Yep. So, the article by Matt Walsh. What principles of effective writing did you see in this article?
I think he did a good job pinpointing like holes in the opposing argument. That makes sense. Like,
Yeah, it does. And like what you were saying, like he did a good job with describing the opposing, but also he did a good job with what feedback they were going to give him. So he basically pinpointed and saying, I know you're going to call me a bigot. I know you're going to say this. So they had no ammunition.
Yeah, I read the comments afterwards at the bottom of the article, and it's seriously exactly what he said they were going to be. Like, the exact same kinds of arguments he said that they were going to have. And it's just because there's no way you can argue with what he pointed out. Like, there's no, unless you brought in your own statistics, but really people are just using a straw man argument. So,
Well, I think his weakest point was that he was so vindictive, and he was really, he made it known that if you don't agree with me, I mean, he just kind of entered in a fighting kind of attitude instead of a more peaceful attitude. He came out fighting, and that offended me a little bit. I was just kind of, whoa, if I had been on the other side, I would have turned him off immediately. So even though I thought his information was interesting, and I don't know, how documented it is, but just his contrariness was, it kind of turned me off.
What was the basis or premise of his stance?
I think he was. I liked his beginning premise about how, this is how nature made it. This isn't an issue that we vote on. This is what life is. This is what nature gave us. We don't tell flowers which flower to mate with. This is just how we work, and that it's set up that way to function properly. And I kind of like that. I mean, I did like that a lot.
yeah, it's like a simple argument, but I mean, I don't know how you can, I don't know, like disagree with that. Like obviously, as man and woman can procreate, and women and women or man and man don't have that ability.
Well, you know, homosexual couples still need one of the other in order to have a family. So that's kind of proof right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he had a second premise too, as he was talking about the dangers of legislation and using the Constitution, making this a constitutional issue, you know, a government issue.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So sorry.
You're fine. No, I actually really liked his paper. Like a lot of the issues he brought up, or a lot of the stances he brought up, were real. I mean, they were going through the legislative at that time, and kind of made you sit back and take a perspective from, I guess, in a naturalistic perspective. You know, like, why are we arguing against things that are natural? You can't. You know, and I think that goes back to, is her name Barlow?
Yes.
Barlow told about how, like, you can't argue statistics. You know, you can't argue facts. You know, as much as people want to. You know, they're more than, like, these people aren't arguing with facts. They're arguing based on the art of persuasion. And there's actually a book out there called How to Persuade People That They're Gay. You know, and so it's usually the art like that they're focusing on more than they're focusing on the facts. You know, kind of interesting.
Facts are hard to find. It takes effort, and on issues like this, especially that attack our core values, anybody's core values, our responses are emotional. We just get so emotionally connected. And, you know, like Mr. Barlow said, you can make anybody cry with a story that's not true. I mean, Budweiser does it all the time. And, so, you know, honing into our emotions is extremely powerful because they can make us, if we have that emotional feeling, then we're going to respond emotionally and deeply as well.
Well, it's faster to think of think or feel that emotion than it is to find and say and prove the facts.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you also, like, you're more passionate with emotion, or passion is an emotion. So like if you think about it in the Book of Mormon, like Captain Moroni, he had emotion. You know, like it was like, this is my cause. You know, we need to fight for our cause. You know, and we need to do the same thing. Like, as much as they're emotional about, like, not emotion, but passionate, I guess, about their cause, we need to do the same. But we have to be careful of putting too much emotion in it that you lose control of yourself. And I think that, I think Matt Walsh kind of had a lot of that in his article. I don't know if...
Over emotion.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Can I share one kind of illustration with you? I was listening to some fireside on tape. I can't even remember who it is, and I'm sorry, but he was a seminary teacher, and every Friday they had devotional, and his class was just getting so morbid. The stories they would tell, and, you know, the kids were always crying, and he finally called in his class presidency and said, you know, what's going on here? We're just so morbid. And they said, well, I thought if they didn't cry, then they weren't feeling the Spirit. You know, I think that's something that we kind of tend to think that, you know, if I'm not crying, then I haven't been moved. Or if I'm not deeply touched emotionally, then I'm not feeling the Spirit. And anyway, I thought that was funny, but I think that that's something that we run into in these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Elder Eyring went up to Elder Packer when he first got called into the quorum and says, is there anything that I can improve on? And Elder Packer was like, yes, don't cry so much. You know, but like, but the reason behind that was he's like, you have to let the people know that the Spirit and emotion, like, you don't cry because you feel the Spirit. You know, like, it affects that. It can happen, but that's not the determining factor.
Yeah, it's not the only way we feel the Spirit.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if you were on the fence when it came to same-sex marriage, how would you feel after reading this article?
I don't know. In the beginning, he says something along the lines of like, at the end of this argument, you'll still believe what like you believe in, like, you know what I mean? I think he opened out with like saying that you're still gonna believe in gay marriage, and I'm still gonna be a bigot, and that's just the way it is. So like, while I enjoyed his article a lot, I don't know if it did a lot of convincing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't an argument that was to sway people. It was just stating.
Well, he closed himself off with that statement. Like, he closed the borders of being persuasive. Like, it wasn't a persuasive article because he said that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That was kind of how that illustrated his vindictiveness, and nobody really wants to join that kind of army.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what was, I think we went over like what was less effective, like he just kind of closed himself off and stuff.
But he even brought Christianity in one time, which I thought, when he said, a Christian who does not understand this is a Christian who does not understand Christianity. And, you know, so he was even putting down the group, the very group that I think he's claiming to be part of.
And he's making a focus point too broad, like with that statement. You know, we're saying like, if you don't believe my points, then you're not a Christian, basically.
And again, if you're not Christian, you don't have no right being on earth. It's kind of how I felt.
Yeah. So, what questions do you still have?
I just think it's very hard to put together a really compelling speech or paper. It takes an awful lot of thought and energy. So, you know, I'm scared to death for this week's assignment.
Yeah.
Well, I think like on this topic, like it's hard to just try to remember the main focus on it too. Like with these, like what your stance is on that. Like, because you could see, like I think Matt did pretty decent, like to try to focus on like like just on his main topic, where the other one it was more like the emotion and it was kind of just his little experience, and the other one was just kind of way out there, repeat the same thing 30 times.
Yeah, I actually really liked
just with all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what were you going to say?
I actually... Sorry, what?
Oh, go ahead. I was just asking you to repeat what you were going to say.
I said I actually really liked his article. You know, like I know he kind of closed himself off at the beginning, but like the points he brought up were actually arguable points. You know, like the point about how can you, like in the legislative of kind of basically he brings out that they're kind of being hypocrites with saying this, but then demanding everybody believes what they believe when they don't want us to demand the same thing, you know. So I kind of feel like some of his points are very persuasive, but his beginning, I think, closed himself off, and so that's the only thing. Like, I actually really liked his article.
Yeah, it kind of shows like you can do some things really good, and then if you just do like maybe a couple things not as well, it can really close off your argument. So you have to be like, make sure to do like everything. I don't know, just as good.
Yeah. Okay, so does anyone else have any other questions or anything to share? Or?
Why don't you summarize this up?
Okay, so we kind of talked about how the arguments against the same-sex closed everyone off because it was religious-based and it was more like a sermon. than it was an argument, especially in a legislative position. The second one was really good, but it was too emotional, and it kind of closed everyone off when he said we don't need help, but really that means why should we help you? And so he ended poorly, but his appeal to emotion really drew everybody in. Then the article by Matt Walsh, he did a really good job in his points and his persuasive points, and he did a really good job in pointing out what his adversary was going to argue back against him, but he did a really poor job in kind of the beginning where he closed himself off by saying, like, I know you're still going to have the same beliefs. You never want to do that in a persuasive article. And kind of how we have to be careful to not go so much into the emotion, but there are facts and statistics to prove truth. So is that everything? Did I cover everything? Is there anything else?
Good job.
Awesome. Okay, let me stop this.